Hello, everybody. This is Pascal from Neutrality Studies, and today I'm hosting a panel to discuss the unfinished Chinese Civil War, or the cross-strait conflict, as it is now called. And I'm referring, of course, to the unsettled dispute between mainland China, governed by the People's Republic of China, the PRC, from Beijing, and the Taiwanese Islands, governed by the Republic of China, the ROC, from Taipei. To discuss this, I have two great experts with me, one from Taipei and one sitting in the United States. The first one is Dr. Joanna Lei, a scholar, businesswoman, US media executive, and former senator in the Republic of China Parliament. And the other one is the very famous and always brilliant Dr. Jeffrey Sachs, an economics professor at Columbia University with decades of experience in US foreign policy. Both of you, welcome.
Thank you very much. Great to be with both of you.
Thank you.
Dr. Lei, maybe let's start with you. You were a lawmaker in Taiwan. You're currently in Taipei, and you are also a critic of US meddling in Chinese internal affairs or in Taiwanese affairs, particularly. Could you maybe lay out what you see as one of the main problems at the moment that is fueling the conflict between Beijing and Taipei?
Thank you. I'm humbled in front of Jeffrey Sachs, so I'll try to be succinct. I'd like to make 3 points. One is, Pascal, you were exactly right that the nature of the cross-strait relation is a civil war, is an unfinished war, unfinished business. And it should be determined by people and government across the Taiwan Strait. But we have seen there were a lot of ideas about Taiwan being an independent, quote unquote, country and deserve to be independent outside of the PRC control. However, my view is there is no difference between us, the situation across Taiwan Strait, and the situation between the East and West Germany before their eventual unification in 1990s. And then the second thing is the United States has played a role in China's affairs in terms of Taiwan, not recently. It goes back to 1832, when the US Maritime forces have been in the West Pacific. And in fact, the United States have tried to use Taiwan as a springboard or bridgehead to control China's southeast provinces and the waterways. In 1850 to 1870, there were different proposals. So today, the situation in Taiwan, I think, is in terms of geopolitical situation, it's just as in the 1830s or 1850s. That is, Taiwan is a very easy chess piece for the United States to make sure that its potential conflict or confrontation with China has a springboard or a bridgehead, and therefore we are being earmarked or designated as a potential flashpoint. However, there is no real promise of US supporting Taiwan's security. So all the things that current DPP is telling the people that the United States will support us, will defend us, it's blatantly incorrect because there is no joint defense treaty. There is no MAC, which is the Military Assistance Advisory Group that was in Taiwan until 1979, when the diplomatic tie was severed. So in terms of the future, in terms of US continued involvement in Taiwan, I think there were two things. That's my third point. Biden's promise to defend Taiwan comes with a price that Taiwan simply cannot afford. There's no US military assistance. There's no joint operability between the two forces. And in fact, they have delayed in deliver any armaments to Taiwan, even with the ones we have paid for. And there's no strategic depth in Taiwan. Should there be a confrontational military situation, there is no strategic depth, and we have very low overall resilience. So Taiwan cannot afford to go into war, which is now being touted as an eventuality or possibility by a lot of American scholars or commentators. And I think that's extremely terrible. And the final point I'd like to make is Biden has propelled Taiwan as a model democracy, a value partner in the West Pacific. However, the DPP is not what they have touted for. in the third term or the second term, in Tsai Ing-wen's term, DPP has a supermajority in Congress. As such, they have passed a series of targeted bills of attainder that allow them to, A, rescind news channels licenses and therefore stamp on the freedom of speech. They have also canceled over 100 political parties, over 40 political associations registration with the Internal Affairs Department. Thirdly, they have incarcerated political dissidents and political party leaders. Even today, they have incarcerated, which is before they were sentenced to be guilty, they have incarcerated the opposition party, the number 3 party leader, Ke Wen-je, to yet again back to before he was even tried. And the last one is they have confiscated KMT's party assets, as well as deemed a lot of KMT affiliates to be special relationship with KMT and confiscated their assets as well. So you can see that the sort of model value partner by DPP, which the Biden administration used as a reason to defend Taiwan, is but a facade or a movie theater. It's a very nice facade, but if you pierce into it, you can see why we have so many silent cries in Taiwan. And our legislative branch has no real power to check and balance the abuse of power by the executive branch or by the president.
For everybody, like the DPP is the currently ruling party that is now has a third term under a new president, and the KMT is the nationalist party, the biggest opposition party. And Jeffrey, we were speaking just before that Taiwan to us looks a lot like a little Ukraine in the Pacific, something that is carved out as a next proxy war. Are you sharing that fear? And what is your views on the development of the speeches, the speech acts that are coming from Washington at the moment?
Thank you very much. I agree with everything Dr. Lee just said. Basically, the U.S. uses Taiwan in the same way that the U.S. has used Ukraine. And I said to Ukrainians several years ago, don't let the U.S. use you. You'll end up destroyed. And I say the same to my many friends in Taiwan. Don't let the U.S. use you. The United States government, the security state, first of all, doesn't care about Taiwan. I'm sorry to say it. It cares about its competition with mainland China. And Taiwan is a piece of a game. Second, I use the phrase game because the people who lead the United States, in my view, are maniacs. They're irresponsible. They think that this is a game. They play a game. Who's on top? Who's number one? Who's got credibility? Who can use reputational force? Who can deploy which instruments? But who suffers are the people on the ground. Ukrainians have lost perhaps 600 or 700,000 dead, and hundreds of thousands wounded. And they're losing on the battlefield because of the game that the United States started to play 30 years ago. Now, that was literally a game, I would say, because when it comes to Ukraine, Zbigniew Brzezinski in 1997, a game player of statecraft, wrote a book called The Grand Chessboard, a game. And he gamed out what it would mean for the United States to expand NATO to Ukraine over Russia's opposition. And he reached the conclusion in 1997, well, Russia could not resist. It has no option. It would have to accede. It was wrong. In other words, it was a bad move. If this were a chess game, okay, he would have lost the chess game. But what he set in motion, he and his colleagues, was not a game, but a real-life disaster. The United States would provoke. The United States would move its military eastward. The United States would ignore all of Russia's red lines. But all would be fine, said Brzezinski, because Russia would have no alternative. One of the things he actually wrote in 1997 is that Russia would never end up siding with China, for example. Okay, he made many, many mistakes, as chess players do. But what resulted was a disaster. Now, the United States is doing the same with Taiwan. The United States has a grand strategy, if one could call it that, although there's nothing grand about it and there's nothing wise about it, so I don't view it as very great strategy. But the U.S. grand strategy is to be number one. And it's to be number one in all parts of the world, including in Asia. I mean, how dare China think itself number one in Asia? The United States is number one in Asia across the Pacific. The whole thing is an absurdity. But the U.S. grand strategy, therefore, is to contain China, to limit China, to put a stick in the spokes of China's economy so that China stumbles or falls into crisis. And it's in that context that Taiwan plays the role in the U.S. game, because the idea is bother China, badger China, weaken China, scare China, divert China. And from a purely military point of view, according to a concept that goes back to one of our most dreadful secretaries of state in our history, John Foster Dulles, if Taiwan is controlled, then the first island chain is controlled, and China cannot project its power into the Pacific. And so there's a strategic element of this. We must control Taiwan. There's a problem, though. Taiwan is not America. Taiwan is not an independent country. Taiwan, according to both the PRC and the ROC, is part of one China. And the United States absolutely is provoking. It's meddling. It's unilaterally sending weapons by the billions of dollars now to Taiwan, as if the PRC would say, well, we're going to send weapons to Mexico because not to Mexico, to Texas, I meant, because we don't like the situation between Texas and the rest of the United States. It's mind-boggling. The United States should not be sending billions of dollars of weapons to a part of a country that it doesn't even have diplomatic relations with, because in 1979, the United States said there is one China, that is our policy, and there is one government that represents China vis-a-vis our relations, and that is the People's Republic of China. All of this is to say, the U.S. is playing a game. It's a dreadfully dangerous, misguided game. I hope people in Taiwan understand. My God, I said it to the Ukrainians, do you really want to be the Afghanistan of Europe? And I would say to the Taiwanese, do you really want to be the Ukrainians of East Asia? The answer is absolutely no. Be careful. Be careful. The United States cannot save you. In fact, all it can do is get you destroyed, because Taiwan will be safe and secure if the United States stops its provocations. This is the irony of the whole situation. Ukraine never had to be destroyed the way it is, and Taiwan can remain safe because mature, grown-up people across the straits on both sides have reached a consensus in the past and can reach a consensus going forward on peace between the two sides. These are two very mature places. These are two places of a shared history and culture, and both need and want peace. And if the United States doesn't put its nose into it, peace actually will prevail across the straits.
Yeah, and let me ask about this, Joanna. Like the fact of the matter is that China is Taiwan's largest trading partner. The fact of the matter is that the Taiwanese government is called the Republic of China because it itself recognizes itself as a China, right? We have de facto two Chinese governments, right? We have a disagreement of who is the legitimate government. You have a disagreement of how to go forward, but how do you see the forces inside the Taiwanese body politic, the ROC body politic, acting with China, with the United States, because we know that a majority of Taiwanese citizens is actually for the status quo. They don't want independence, they don't want reunification, they want status quo. What are your thoughts?
Exactly. So let me define what status quo is. I am 66 years old. The last time there were bombs fell on Kinmen was 66 years ago. So I recall, Pascal, you said once that we are de jure at war, but de facto in peace. And that's the status quo of Taiwan. We have managed, even right after the last war in Kinmen, we have managed to stay out of each other and a status quo, which is a relative peace. And also in 2005, I was part of the envoy with Mr. Lian Zhan to visit Beijing with Hu Jintao. After the first time, the leaders of KMT and Communist Party in China shook hands, we actually had 8 years of relative peace with people discussing in terms of practical matters and resolving those, signing agreements with 22 government-to-government meetings, signing about 32 different agreements. So we were entirely possible and capable of resolving our issues with the leaders across Taiwan Straits, like Jeff was saying. But the turning point was really the last two DPP leaders, starting from Tsai Ing-wen in 2016 to Lai Ching-te in 2024. They have, I think, with the encouragement of the United States, pushed an extremist separatist agenda, which is Taiwan independence. And when they push that agenda, which wants to separate Taiwan from the overall concept of China, then PRC has drawn one after another red line, extremely clear red line with their internal laws, such as anti-succession law and so on and so forth. And they actually laid out 3 conditions that there would be military confrontation. One is there's no hope for eventual unification. Secondly, there is international involvement, which is what Jeff was saying, international involvement in the Taiwan situation. In my view, such as if U.S. sent a lot of military armaments or servicemen or another military advisory group to Taiwan, and that would constitute the second one. And the third one is there were no possibility and there is a strong push of Taiwan independence. So all 3 has a strong warning sign laid out for people in Taiwan. So if we are really looking at status quo, in the most recent election, DPP won 40% of the 70% of the people who voted. So you can use the broadest number. 28% of the people in Taiwan supported DPP, which is Lai Ching-te. And even smaller numbers supported his extreme separatist position. So less than 28%, I think the ones who support his extremist position is less than 10%. Unfortunately, our system, our structure, doesn't give us ability to check and balance the executive branch. We have 5 branches of government. If someone wins the presidency, they will control the executive branch. The control yuan, which is a sort of quasi-legal judicial, the judicial branch, because they have nomination right of all the Supreme Court justices, and also the ability to use their ability to have bureaucrats to select and use bureaucrats. So that's the 4th yuan. But the only branch, which is legislative branch, has no ability to check and balance the other 4 branches. Our legislative yuan doesn't have the true power of the purse string. We approve the budget, but we cannot give the authorization of using the money. We don't have investigation rights. We don't have congressional hearing. We cannot hold people contempt of the Congress. So we have very handicapped legislative branch that will have no ability to balance whatever the executive branch leader wants to do. And that is a very real situation of our inability to fight Lai Ching-de's DPP separatist agenda. He can say anything in January 1st, May 20th, which is his inauguration date, and October 10th, which is our National Day. All three speeches send extremely strong signals to PRC, and PRC will interpret his three speeches and decide what they would do to Taiwan.